Okay, well, hello, and we're about to see an essay written by a viewer called Adingo on Lady Macbeth after having watched my videos on Lady Macbeth. It is a grade 8 or 9 essay, and there are 8 things which make it so. 8 things which you have to know. So what do the examiners mean by being critical? Well, it means you look at more than one interpretation and you use words like perhaps or could. How are you exploratory? Well, you show that you're looking at more than one possible interpretation. How do you show you have a well-structured argument? Well, clearly you have a conclusion which sums things up, but also you pose yourself a question which you are going to answer throughout the essay. How do you show a range of judicious references? Well, it doesn't matter how many you have from the text as a whole and how many you have from the extracts, but the examiner will decide it's judicious if you pick exactly the right examples to back up your interpretations up here. Insightful analysis of language, well, that means you're not obsessed by P. You're actually getting into your different interpretations, often for the same quotation. Yeah, so when you look at one quotation from more than one point of view, that is being insightful. Can you write about form and structure? This is much more tricky. Structure is where you'll get most of your marks, asking yourself why this happens here, why that is said there. The form is really why this is a tragedy or why this is a play, and you can pretty much ignore that and still get top marks, as this writer does. Judicious use of subject terminology doesn't mean there's some kind of checklist. It just means that every time you're writing about something, you attempt to give it the correct name, the name that a student of literature would use. And then lastly, it asks you to be convincing when you're exploring these different interpretations at the beginning. And I've highlighted in yellow here, contextual factors appear as an option in number 8, but this is a clear way to make your essay different from all other students because you have explored real contextual factors. Well, let's see what that looks like in the essay. So Adingo had watched one of my videos on Lady Macbeth and said, "Love the video, sir. Could you mark my essay? I use the extract and question from the specimen material." Well, I'm not going to reproduce that here because the examiners at AQA don't like me doing that for their copyright reasons. Let's launch in because we can work out what the title is from the beginning of the essay. To a certain extent, Lady Macbeth is presented as powerful in the extract and the play as a whole. So you can see by writing to a certain extent, our writer is immediately being exploratory and immediately being critical, saying I'm not completely in agreement and I'm going to show you a more sophisticated way of looking at this problem. However, this power is undermined by her desperation for power. I added that in there for clarity. And the male characters in the play. So the male characters also undermine her. Shakespeare constructs her to represent the majority. So if you've watched my videos, you'll know how I keep insisting that you write about the characters as a construct. Now that lifts your marks into grade 5 and above. So she represents the majority of women in the Jacobean era. Here you can see the context being explored properly. And also shows that she is the victim of a patriarchal society. So now we're starting to look at these bits of judicious terminology and context as well. Lady Macbeth is presented as powerful in this extract when she demands the spirits to unsex her. Notice the embedded quotations. The imperative verb. It's quite important that this is imperative because that's how you give instructions. That links to the idea of her being in power. So very good use of subject terminology here. That's what judicious means, the right word that helps you explain what you want. Suggests her power and strength. She is demanding evil spirits to take her femininity away, despite knowing that she will go to hell. So we've got terminology here, this idea of femininity being part of her construct, and then we've got context, knowing that she will go to hell for her desire to commit regicide here. For a contemporary audience, again this is context, and the word contemporary is subject-specific vocabulary and terminology. This would be deeply unsettling, since many would be fearful of the supernatural and of being damned. So really the whole of that paragraph is context. And it's context that's relevant to her fear of going to hell. It's not just there to show that the writer can include context. It fits the writer's argument. Lady Macbeth is willing to deal with the supernatural, and so is seen as brave and powerful, characteristics shared by men and in particular soldiers, and I've added this bit in for clarity, like Macbeth. Now here you can see the context is woven in brilliantly. She's willing to deal with the supernatural, which is a contemporary view, and she's contrasted this. Sorry, I don't know if Adingo is a girl or a boy. I'm just switching between. Contrasted this with the power of men in the patriarchal society, and that links to Adingo's argument. She can then be seen as a character who is going against the patriarchy, which would not occur in many plays at the time. So here we've got the only real reference to form. So Shakespeare is writing a play here, which, whoops, sorry, I'm just looking for that, which is different to the form of other plays. Now, I'm not going to keep highlighting all this terminology and context. You get the idea now, and hopefully you'll start spotting it for yourself as we move through. She is further presented as powerful when she tells Macbeth to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. See how this quotation, even though it's a long one, is embedded into the sentence. The simile of the innocent flower can be interpreted, see that how that is looking at more than one interpretation, which is critical and exploratory, as her mocking Macbeth's feminine qualities, qualities which she appears to no longer have. This would be very dangerous for her, as it could be dangerous to mock a warrior. So we have a bit of context there within the play. However, and using a word like however immediately tells the reader that you're looking at an alternative interpretation, tells the examiner you're being exploratory. She comments on his masculine qualities of being the serpent. She is hence very manipulative and a powerful woman. The metaphor of the serpent is an allusion to the biblical story where Adam and Eve get tempted by a serpent. So we've got context being used relevantly here. A Jacobean audience would immediately understand the weight of such an allusion. It is clear she will be punished. So the examiner will understand that that punishment means that she'll go to hell, because that's what a Jacobean audience would have understood, which links back to the idea of the serpent and Adam and Eve. So a very economical way of showing a real understanding of the context of Shakespeare's audience. This paragraph would have been even better if Adingo had explained why focusing on the idea of the serpent would be seen as more masculine and therefore more likely to encourage Macbeth to kill Duncan. Her fearless nature combined with manipulative skills present her as powerful. Notice how Adingo is giving more than one interpretation at the same time, which always makes this exploratory. Shakespeare structures the text to present her as powerful. The extract is very early on in the play, and a female character to be given a soliloquy so early would be very strange. So this is a really useful analysis here, Because Adingo is thinking, well, why now? Why does Lady Macbeth say this now? You know, why does Shakespeare give her these lines? Why at the beginning of the play? And why is it a soliloquy where she dominates the stage? This whole paragraph here becomes very sophisticated because it looks at the structure in quite a lot of detail. By giving her this soliloquy, she is presented as powerful. She would be listened to by the audience and would be centre stage. This is a really useful point that's often overlooked. Many women would be subservient to men and not have this much influence. So Lady Macbeth is presented clearly as different to other women of the time. Now, what's not clear yet is whether Shakespeare wants us to wants women in his society to be equally less subservient. In other words, he wants them to be more equal to men, or whether he's criticising Lady Macbeth for doing that. But although that's not made explicit, I think you and I can both agree that we can infer from the essay so far that Adingo is saying that Shakespeare is on the side of the feminist perspective here and wanting more women to be and not to be subservient. Let's get to the next paragraph. In addition, Macbeth sends her this letter despite knowing he will meet her soon. His dependency on his wife presents her as powerful. This would have been even better if we had an explanation there of how he's depending on her to manipulate him to form this plan to kill Duncan before he arrives. This power is subtly undermined in this extract and throughout the play. So this is a really sophisticated point. Yes, she's powerful, but Shakespeare undermines that power. In the extract, she keeps Duncan under her battlements. The preposition could be seen as her way of showing dominance. So far so good, she looks powerful. But now we're going to get an exploratory response, and we tell the examiner with the connective, alternatively. Pay attention, examiner. This is an alternative viewpoint, therefore I'm being exploratory. Alternatively, we can view this as her desperation for power that she cannot obtain by just means. This is echoed when at the end of the play the audience hear a cry of woman within. This stage direction is what signifies her death. Lady Macbeth is killed off stage, which presents how powerless she really is and how, despite assisting in regicide, she still obtains no power because of one reason: she is a woman. So this is now making it much more explicit that Shakespeare has taken on a feminist perspective, and that's why he's deliberately killed her off stage, which would seem strange to the audience, but he's making this kind of political point, that women are marginalised. They do have lives which exist outside the main action, if you like, off stage in real life. Her weakness is further presented when Shakespeare writes Macbeth to completely undermine her power. So this is sophisticated. Macbeth himself is going to undermine her. She is told by Macbeth to be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, when she asks for more information. The word dearest could be Macbeth showing endearment to his wife, but most likely it represents his lack of respect for her. The adjective of dear is used several times by Macbeth when he addresses her, and so presents how he sees her as inferior. We're having to infer what you mean by that. You know, why would dear suggest inferior rather than precious? And it's because he doesn't bother using her name. It's just dismissive of her. But again, even though you're not explicit about that, we can infer it. So now you're running out of time. You've written an awfully huge amount, and we need a conclusion that sums up what you've argued, but also looks to the future. So we'll see what happens here. The development of Lady Macbeth is a salient feature of the play, as it presents the overwhelming power of the patriarchy. So that's really clear analysis of the argument showing that this now is a feminist play. We are made to sympathise with her, as she said, "Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it," which shows her humanity. Then I've added this bit in bold, "rather than an evil nature," which I think you implied, but it's worth being explicit, because that again shows why we should sympathise with her. Macbeth, it's in quotation marks here, so we know it's the play rather than the character, well done, can be interpreted as a feminist text, I think you wrote feminine, as she is a woman who is restricted from opportunities due to the society she lives in, and so Shakespeare attempts to make the audience sympathise with her in order to promote change. So that again is that looking outward and looking forward that I talked about in your quotation, in your conclusion. So really well constructed essay, 674 words, and you should be aware from my videos in the past that essays over 600 words are what is needed on average to get a grade 8 or above. And hopefully you can see that these 8 things have been done all the way through the essay, probably in every single paragraph really. The ones that are most impressive to an examiner are the analysis of structure, you know, why this happens here and why this happens to that character now. That was done very, very well in this essay. And you'll have noticed the context being woven in throughout the essay. Yes, not as a separate paragraph just to say, hey, look, I'm doing context, but context woven in like embedded quotations. You will notice that it's a well-structured argument because Adingo said what their argument was going to be right at the start. Let's remind ourselves how he or she did that by saying that they were going to agree to a certain extent, and then arguing that although she is presented as powerful, this power is undermined by her desperation for power and the male characters in the play, this idea of the patriarchal society uniting against her. So a brilliantly argued essay. It's not perfect, but grades 8 and 9 don't have to be perfect, as I hope you can see. And finally, here is my Lady Macbeth playlist, 5 videos on Lady Macbeth, how to write an essay on Lady Macbeth, Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene, Lady Macbeth controlled assessment, which was an old form of essay writing, but still incredibly relevant, and an analysis of 2 of the most famous quotations, look like the innocent flower and out damn spot. In fact, I think I'll probably add some more videos to the playlist for you. Very, very easy to get 100% if you get a question on Lady Macbeth. Good luck in your exam. Don't forget to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.